Hello and welcome to a new video. In today's video, I'm gonna go through 10 tips for relicking your guitar. I hope that these tips will inspire you and help you along in your process of creating a really nice guitar that you are happy with and that you like to play and that inspires you to make great music. If it does so, don't forget to let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to press the like button.
Number 1.
So my first tip is finding old guitars and feeling them. Playing them and feeling how they sound. A lot of what relic guitars are actually about is how it feels. I know that there are people out there who think that it's only about pretending that you have something you don't have, but it's actually about a certain kind of feeling that an old worn-in guitar has. And trying to get that feeling, being comfortable with the guitar from the get-go basically. So find old guitars and play guitars and figure out how they feel and what it is you like about them.
Number 2.
So for number 2, I have something that is very practical and that I feel is very important, and that is to document guitars. Get yourself a DSLR, learn how to use white balance, start photographing old vintage guitars. And the reasons why I say that you have to document and photograph yourself is because you need to take pictures of the details that matters to you, but you also need to know what pure white in the pictures are. If you, for example, look at the pictures in my Mike Bloomfield guitar series of my guitar and of Mike Bloomfield's guitar, the coloring of the pictures is whatever they did when they took the pictures. I have no idea what the actual yellowing of the lacquer on that guitar really looks like. And so I had to go into my own pictures of old white vintage guitars and look at those pictures, because sometimes a person will edit a picture, make them look more colorful and nicer and brighter and more beautiful than they might actually look in real life. So instead of going off pictures you find on Google, have your own data bank where you know exactly what it is you have photographed. So learn a little bit about photographing and how to use white balance and how to take nice pictures, so you can really have good material to work out from when it comes to things like colors and discoloring and things like that.
Number 3.
Okay, so my third tip is create a story. Find a way for the guitar to look and behave and where it's been. For example, is this a guitar that someone's gigged a lot of? Is this a guitar that has moved from one place to another, maybe from one country to another? Is this a guitar that has been sitting in a bedroom and being loved and played by someone but never really actually gigged? Or is it maybe a guitar that has been played but then locked in a closet and forgotten? Or is it a guitar that has had one owner its entire life? Is it maybe a guitar that has had multiple owners and someone has modded it a bunch? Those things can be seen. Like, for example, if someone has switched out the tuners and they have plugged up the holes, that could be a really, details that could make it fun and interesting to look at. Or what if, something really horrible has happened to the guitar, like maybe someone threw a bottle at this guy in the 60s who were having a gig and it smashed directly into the guitar. Try to come up with those kinds of ideas, because that's where you'll have a lot of fun with your relicking job, but also create something special and unique, and it will actually make the whole thing more alive, because usually a guitar isn't just magically worn. Something happens to it.
Number 4.
For number 4, we're going to go with one that is very hard to pull off, but that I think everyone needs to do. And that is less is more. When it comes to relic guitars, that's actually really true. There are some legendary guitars that we all know and love and think are really cool that are very, very, very worn out. But the truth is, most old guitars aren't that much worn out. There are people who have like acid for sweat, but you most likely don't. So try to just stay on the subtle side. Do little things here and there, a little chip off there, a little worn out lacquer there, a little bit of a stain or fading, or a little rust under a saddle here and there, not too much. Small little details. In the end, I think you'll have something that looks really nice if you do go with less is more. It's hard because it's fun to relic a guitar and you'll get carried away. So you have to always try to pull yourself back a little bit and look at it from afar and say, okay, this is enough. And another thing that's good about this is that you can always add more. If you relic the guitar like crazy, and there are pictures on Google of failed relics, and we're not going to talk about that, but if you relic the guitar too much, you can't really go back. But if you just relic it a little bit, you can always add a little bit more later. And that's actually really great. So maybe try to see the relicking more as a long process and not as something that you do quickly at the end of the weekend.
Number 5.
Okay, so the next tip I have for you is think about things like grime and dirt. You don't always have to do a bunch of rust and things like that. Not every guitar has been treated poorly and had to be on stage and gotten all messed up. Some guitars have just been played and grime and things like that from like skin and sweat have gotten stuck in the little holes where the Allen wrench for adjusting the saddles, for example, or maybe the screws holding down the pickguard are dark in the little crevices and things like that. So just adding paint and stains and different things like that. It's not really nice to put in real dirt or real grime into your guitar, so try to find a way of putting paint or something else similar to that in there. But do think about those things. Also stuff like staining the lacquer and things like that, because lacquer usually gets kind of changed by things like if the guitar has been out into the sun, for example, has been in maybe something like a smoky bar. So think about those kinds of things. It sort of goes back to the story element a little bit, but also a guitar usually has a little bit of dirt and things like that. So try to find funny things that you can use to add to it and do it in a sort of subtle way. Usually, for example, when I work on old guitars, the screws are almost always filled in with grime and dirt.
Number 6.
Okay, so for number 6, I have something that you will see on a lot of guitars if you buy them secondhand and they aren't, for example, really expensive guitars, and that is repairs. Maybe have your guitar have repairs. For example, maybe do some small chip outs and dings, maybe, break off a little piece of the headstock. Maybe don't break the entire headstock because that could change the way the guitars sound. And then try to glue things up and try to fix the cracks and dings with things like, for example, nail polish or super glue, and let those things be shown so that it looks like this guitar has actually at some point also been cared for and people have tried to keep it together. That's one of those details that you don't see that often and that I think is really important and really sells the idea of the guitar being alive and being something that has been used. Because when you get your first ding and scratch on your guitar, you usually try to fix it and maybe blend it in. And then when you start getting more and more and more, at some point you're like, okay, I guess this is just a guitar that has a lot of dings. Then those things start to happen. But adding a couple of repair marks and things that you've fixed on the guitar as well could really be a useful way of making the guitar look good.
Number 7.
Making the lacquer matter and smoother, finding the places where you have, by moving the guitar on your body, maybe smoothed out the lacquer or made it a little bit dull and smoother. For example, the back of the neck is one that everyone talks about, but there are other places. For example, the arm carve where your arm has been moving, the belly carve where it's been going up against your body. There are places like that where the lacquer must have been affected by years and years and years of basically polishing with you as the sandpaper. So think about those spots and where they can be, and maybe you can add some dull areas and some areas that are maybe half in between dull and shiny. If you've seen my video where I talk about my Strat, you know that I, for example, sanded away a lot of the lacquer, and that meant that I had to buff up the guitar again. But I never really buffed it back up to a super high gloss. And that's because I wanted it to have a more satin kind of feeling, but a little bit more glossy than a satin. So try to find a nice in-between where it's not super glossy, but it's also not super satin. And find also the spots where you feel that it's more shiny and less shiny.
Number 8.
My next part goes a little bit back to story, but I feel like everything sort of has to come out from story. And the next thing is habit. Think about things like, what kind of player has this been? What kind of habits have they had? For example, some people, they stay at the low end of the neck and they never really go away from those basic chords. And you could have someone who's maybe had a guitar and only used it for those kinds of chords, and then they sold the guitar in the early 80s maybe, and the person who bought it was a shredder, and so the war pattern that they created on the guitar is totally different, and you can have two different patterns, and it's basically because the habits of the player has changed. And you can think about those things as well. Habit is really the reason why there is wear on the guitar, because you have someone who's done the same thing so many times that the lacquer has been pulled off. But you have to also think about the fact that it can't only be about habits, because that can look really fake as well. Even if you are a blues player, you will eventually at some times over all the years you play guitar, play something else than blues. You will at some point be like, oh, I'm just going to noodle around and play funk, or I'm just going to, play every note on the guitar because I want to test and see if I have any bass on any string at any fret. So you have to think about things like relicking a little bit more than just the minor pentatonic scale or something like that, because most likely you don't have a player who's been playing only one scale in one place for their entire life. Think about habits, but also try to break the habit a little bit.
Number 9.
Okay, so for number 9, symmetry. Symmetry is really important because that's what makes the guitar look nice. Think about like, oh, I have a little bit of relic up here, I need a little bit down here, move things around in the corner. For example, if you have a lot of relic where the arm carve is, because you have the idea that the arm has been pulling away a lot of the lacquer, you need to have some other spots that also have some relic, because you can't really have a guitar that is super clean all over the body, but right up there everything is gone. It will create a weird sort of asymmetrical feeling to the guitar, and so try to look at the whole of the guitar and see like, oh, I'm chipping away a little bit here, I need to go over to the other side and maybe chip off a little bit on that side as well.
Number 10.
Number 10 is actually what I consider to be the most important part. It's honesty. Don't sand off the logo of a Squier guitar and put Fender on it. Don't buy a really cheap like Harley Benton kit or something like that and spray it with nitrocellulose lacquer and make it into a replica of an old guitar and then pretend it's not actually just a replica. It's okay to nerd in on all the small details and trying to make a guitar that looks exactly like an old guitar. And it is okay to make it so good that people can't tell the difference. But then don't put Fender on the logo. Put your own name on the logo so that people know. If you know a lot about old vintage guitars, that's awesome. And if you're able to build a guitar that has all the features and little details, that's a skill that I feel is very nice, and I think it's actually something that we should cherish, because it's actually a really beautiful thing to be able to create something as beautiful and nice as an old vintage guitar. Please just don't make it into a counterfeit. Well, I feel like I started to ramble a little bit there at the end, but it is important to me because I do really love relic guitars and vintage guitars. But anyway, I hope you liked the video. Talk to me in the comments below. Let me know what you think and feel. If you have any other tips, let me know. I do have some more tips, but I feel like 10 is a good number, and we'll make another one in a couple of years, maybe. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. It is important that you do those things. It helps the channel out a lot in more ways than you might think actually, but it is actually a lot of work to make these videos. So I do appreciate if you help me. Until next time, stay awesome and cool and go and relic a guitar, because it is so much fun to relic a guitar. You get to be super creative and really dial in your nerd side and go into small details. And yes, it is a lot of fun.